happening at different levels of reforms. I will start from strategic level. Start from strategic initiatives. Last week, Strategy 2020 was presented by the President in Dnipropetrovsk, Odessa, and Chernivtsi. In Dnipropetrovsk, we were discussing the potential of the development of the Ukrainian machine building and space industry. In Odessa, the issue of logistic potential of Ukraine, combating corruption, and high quality execution by the customs bodies and controlling bodies their functions as to preventing smuggling in Ukraine. We continue our work, and this week we hope that on the website Reforms in UA we will publish all the comments we received to the Strategy 2020. The analytical analysis has been made. We have received more than 300 feedbacks. We continue the work on the project of identifying the factors of growth. We received the comments from different institutions, the World Bank case, and the group of international advisors, among which there are Anders Saslund, Kaha Bendukidze from Ernst & Young, Deloitte companies. We put it all together to suggest different viewpoints or different understanding by experts where Ukraine should be growing. We started cooperating in more detail, and we're looking for the experts for developing the balanced system of indicators at the operational level. We've already had till the end of October. We need to complete the first stage of developing the plan for restoring the country, the plan 2017, and that is the plan headed by Vice Prime Minister Groisman. That's a joint work of the presidential administration and the Cabinet of Ministers to present this plan at the donor conference, which will take place in January, talking about operational and technical issues. The coalition agreement took a lot of time. It's a serious document, which is for the first time in Ukraine drafted as it is. I cannot talk about details, but this document reflects the issues of governance and all the reform issues, specific reforms, specific steps which are correlated with the Strategy 2020 announced by the President. And I believe that during the next few days this will become more public. Now the dialogue is going on about that, and I would like to thank all those who were involved into developing it, because we had a unique team of experts working on it, and I will keep an intrigue here. So now talking about very specific reforms which are being implemented, talking about procurements, public procurements. We continue to develop the program code. We declared at the last meeting that we are encouraging Ukrainian developers to finish it by the beginning of December, so that we can test it in December. We unfortunately we have a difficult situation with monitoring of public procurements in the Ministry of Economic Development. Now the Ministry of Economic Development has monopolized all the control in the sphere of public procurements, and so now we have established the procedure for monitoring of public procurements, and that is quite an interesting issue. We would like to draw attention of the Ministry of Development, Economic Development, to the fact that the control over public procurements is to be executed in accordance with Ukrainian legislation, because there's a law on public procurements. The reform of civil service. Last week, we involved the Sigma experts to develop the law on public service or civil service, and Sigma will in the nearest future present their comments, and the draft document and the recommendations of Sigma will be taken into account when finalizing the law. We continue our work on deregulation. It's more than 300 initiatives. The team of Visit doing business in Ukraine suggested 28 specific documents, which we and that's approximately such a file of documents. As to organizational and technical issues, and I give you the update, we hope that we continue the design of reforms in UA. We would like to thank the Ukrainian Media Center in that. The project office, we got the support of EBRD and other donors for setting up such donor office, and it will have three functions. First, controlling the development of reforms. The development should take place in ministries, agencies, or initiative groups which exist in different institutions or under the presidential administration, like the Council on Reforming the Judiciary, the Council on Reforming Judiciary, and the Working Group on Judicial Reform. Well, it's approved. It's been approved this week, the composition of this council. Now, the first, control over implementation of reforms, control over development of reform, monitoring of implementation and communication, the assistance in communication to the society, to the public, the concept, the models, and other issues related to reforming different sectors. Because today, there's a big need to explain how this or that reform will reflect, will affect business, will affect the life of people. And as to reforms in presidential administration, as of 27th of October, the percentage of old of people from the old times in presidential administration is 44%. As to e-governance, we have pilot processes already operating, and the presidential administration uses them. We started electronic communication with the Cabinet of Ministers. We continue to get scanned documents, but this week the team succeeded in introducing the function of recognition, so we can move from just the image document to text document, which helps us to process these documents faster and inform the civil servants about what letters or decisions are sent by the Cabinet of Ministers, which helps us make the work of civil servants more efficient. And this way we accumulate a lot of information, and in the future we'll be working with all these documents. We continue training of our personnel, and that is done. We teach them how to work with information systems. It's not just introducing e-systems, electronic systems. We create the videos which our people can watch later, so that they understand how they can work with the information systems more efficiently. That's it. We are updating our website, and there's more and more information about the presidential administration there. We are looking forward to get feedback, and I would like to finish on that and leave some time for questions. Thank you. And I would like to ask a strategic question. It's for the first time when in the Ukrainian parliament we have this wide pro-European majority, which according to the experts will give an incentive for the course of reforms in Ukraine. What are your expectations about that? And which factors will not allow such forecasts to be implemented? So analyzing all the feedback from international experts, I received many greetings from them via electronic, mail and other electronic media. I received greetings with our elections, and I personally, as the citizen of Ukraine and as a person who works in the presidential administration, the person who's responsible for reforms in Ukraine, I would like to see this unification or this united team which will be focused on reforms. It is very important for us to have the key reforms being implemented. There's no time to delay, and only getting united we can get results. But we need to understand that politics is politics, but at the time when Ukraine needs changes, at that time we need to focus our attention on result. And this coalition agreement, does it have reforms? Most of the coalition agreement, two-thirds of it, it's specific steps, specific reforms. I have two questions. When will you present the passports of reforms? We do not see them yet. That's the first question. And the second question, could you specify what happened with the public procurements? What has the Ministry of Economic Development done, and how do you see the reform in this sector should continue? Because the political force headed by the Prime Minister got enough votes, and they have ambitions to continue what we have. So how will the reforms be going on in this sphere? As to passports of reforms, we have developed them. They're being correlated with the issues which are included into the coalition agreement, and that is why we do not publish them. Because it's important, first of all, I believe the society wants to see the coalition agreement. The passports of reforms have some parts which need to be discussed. It's especially about indicators. And we will attract experts and the civil society into discussing these indicators. And next week we'll start publishing them on a side reforms in UA. As to the public procurements, I would like to say now there's an order of the Ministry of Economy, and the Ministry of Economy has the right to receive all the documents related to specific procurement. It's like a parallel process. Some institution is doing procurement, and all the documents are to be sent to the Ministry of Economy. And the Ministry of Economy basically is doing such procurement, and that's strange. There's the law and there's the institution which is responsible for public procurements, and basically the situation is that one ministry interferes with the activities of other institution, and that's violation of the legislation. And another question was about if this happens, well, how will that be happening? And we need to expect to have a new government. I believe that we have the Minister of Economy, and when we start introducing electronic procurements, then all these issues will be resolved. We need to use modern approaches, like in most countries of the world. 1+1 TV channel. Listening to you, I have an impression that it's like Windows. It costs the systemic administrator wants a lot of money, but without system administrator, you cannot understand the reforms. It's not just something that you can switch and start working in you, but the expectations are high. Do you believe that you are now continuing to test the patience of people, and you will not have time left for reforms if you starting so long? But I believe that we are moving at three levels with the rate, with the pace that Ukrainian legislation and political processes in the country allow us to do so. We need to understand that in order to implement reforms, it's not populism. That means specific steps. But for specific steps, we need to have Verkhovna Rada, that is voting for certain laws. We need to have the government which passes resolutions. We need to make popular and unpopular reforms, and we need two important components for that. We started clear processes of strategic planning. Any tactical steps are to be made in the directions defined by strategy. Yanukovych was also making tactical steps, but in a different direction. We need to make tactical steps towards European community. And for us to be able to adjust our next steps, we need to have a strategy. Then we need to move to 3-year planning, like it's done in European countries. For that, we develop the plan and we work on that. And when we get to specific steps and these three elements, they are basis for coalition agreement. Reforms is a process of changes. Talking about testing the society, yes, I do understand you. I also live in Ukraine, and my children go to school in Ukraine. And every day I understand that the labor reforms is bad, but coalition agreement in its content reflects all specific steps, all the decisions which are to be made. And many professionals worked on that with great experience. These are people with great experience. I was coordinating, but people who have very professional knowledge and very big experience were doing it. And the structure of reforms corresponds fully the priorities defined by the Strategy 2020 of the President of Ukraine. Two questions from Austrian agency. What are your plans in the sphere of currency regulations? Because recently there are certain restrictions in this sector, and that was the topic of discussion in Western business circles. That's bad for the investment climate of Ukraine. And secondly, maybe you will explain what coalition agreement is. There are some elections, then some people meet, they have negotiations, and they together draft some agreement. Well, I believe that before elections, the agreement was drafted, and now it just needs signatures. How can you explain that? I'm surprised by this question from European journalists, because we took as an example the coalition agreements of European countries, the experience of European countries. The time the journalist, yes, the agreement is signed, but the coalition agreement is drafted before the elections, definitely, and in the process. Because in order to draft and to prepare all the components of any agreement, For that, you need a document. There might be different options for different issues there, and participants of coalition agreement, they discuss these options. And that document was drafted. I have an impression that you're talking about some ready document, but it's not realistic in the West. After elections, it takes a few weeks. We have a ready document which is being discussed. The presidential team, headed by the president, drafted the coalition agreement. And the question about currency regulations, I believe it's better to say in current situation, it's more the question to the National Bank of Ukraine. I wouldn't be trying to take some initiative or to provide some comments on that. There is the policy of the National Bank, the leadership of the National Bank. We need to understand the difficult situation in Ukraine. We need to understand the situation which we have with the currency for importers, exporters. I know the situation. We are in a dialogue with the National Bank about how to improve the situation. Any other questions? One more. You are presenting one of the branches of power, and you are leading and reforming Ukraine. We hear your name, and the word reforms is associated with the presidential administration. There is the Cabinet of Ministers and Verkhovna Rada. How will you communicate all together? And does it mean that the presidential administration will be working on the reforms, or will this be the systemic work of all the branches of power and the civic organizations? Basically, the president understands that it's not just the issue of peace which is important. Reforms is also an important issue, and that's why the president invited me to work in the presidential administration on these issues. But it's important. When we set up the National Council of Reforms, that's the body that unites the Cabinet of Ministers, the Verkhovna Rada, and the President. When we look further, the issue of visionary, of long-term vision, if we look at the responsibilities and powers and terms of the powers, we see the president. When we talk about operational implementation, we talk about Cabinet of Ministers. When we talk about legislative initiatives, that's Verkhovna Rada. But the Constitution now has the horizontal decision-making process, not the vertical, like it's in some countries which were implementing reforms. They created a special vertical of decision-making. We have the horizontal process, and for that we need the dialogue. Uniting the Cabinet of Ministers, the administration of the President, all these NGOs, they participate in all these issues. We attract experts of civil society from RPR, Nova Ukraina, Kyiv School of Economics, CASE, international companies, so international experts. We are very open, but we want to select things for reforms which will have a quick impact on changes in the country. For that, we need a dialogue. And we take initiative in organizing this process. But if you've heard, the project office will not be doing work instead of someone else. We're not duplicating functions. We help coordinate issues. It's like reform of civil service. That's the National Agency on Civil Service. E-governance, it's agency on e-governance. They are developing it. They have working groups and experts. We help these institutions to be coordinated. And also, I'm trying to give an update on what's happening, the briefing on what's happening. That's it. Once we have no more questions, we would like to thank Dmytro. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, and our working day